Meeting is being recorded.
Okay, so I'm Terry Lohman from UUJEC, and we've asked Carlos Jimenez to speak to us. He's from the AFL-CIO. He's the communications director, and we'd like to know what we can do to be a support for unionization. Carlos, you can take it away.
Amazing. Thank you, Terry. And thank you for the opportunity and the invitation, the chance to be here with you all tonight. Really thank you to everybody who had a hand in organizing the space and for all the work you do with UUJUC, who you just mentioned, and really all the work everybody does here through the UU community. I got the sense in asking about this meeting, that I'd be in a room full of people or in conversation with folks who have a deep passion and a conviction and drive to act on values and work towards the improvement of the world, right, and the lives of the people we work with, we live with. And so I'm really excited to be here. Again, my name is Carlos Jimenez. I'm not quite the comms director. I'd have, really no time. If that were the case. I serve in a special projects capacity, though I do a lot of external events and communication, with the Federation, but serve in a special projects capacity in our growth division, which means that I really get to be in service, in and across the labor movement and work with all kinds of people, groups, coalitions, types of workers, in really different situations. And I think the constant there being that really we're thinking about and wrestling with the question of what it's going to take to grow and win and be successful, in making improvements in the lives of those workers, and really making sure that workers who want to be able to negotiate their working conditions, their own social, economic contracts at work, who are trying to come together as 2, 3, whatever number of workers there are in a facility in union and in unity, that we help them figure out the strategies, the relationships, the resources, the conversations that it's going to take so that we have the most chance of succeeding. And I'm talking about it that way, and I'll come back to this because the truth is, at least in my experience, that making changes and improvements in the workplace, particularly the bigger the employer, and getting to tap into these rights that exist, right, by law, and exercise our ability to bargain and unionize, it's extremely hard. And so, for the next few minutes here, what I wanted to do, and really ahead of Labor Day, I kind of just wanted to talk about everybody here and get to know you a little bit more, but also talk about work, how it's changing. I like to start big, and so I'll start big and quickly hone into the immediate and present and what we can do, Terry. So totally hear you on that. But I do just want to remind us and start right with the idea that work is changing, that workers and the workforce itself is changing, and that workers are experiencing those changes in work. And nothing like this pandemic, I think, I don't know, I'd love to hear from you all, but this pandemic has absolutely changed the game and everything. I don't know that there's going back or what, the new normal will be. And I do want to end a little bit on unions, this moment, the resurgence, and why it matters. But really, I think my hope here, and what I'll do with the 15, 20 minutes that I think I have here, is present some info, ahead of Labor Day, some context, spark some conversation, and really Q&A, and to address any questions you might have. So we had a little bit of a PowerPoint. I don't know, Terry, if you suggest we use it, I'm happy to load it up in screen share. If that's easy, whatever you tell me makes sense here. But I was just going to use it as a backdrop. I'm not going to, read off it too much, but just so that, you're not bored here with me on your screen. I'm happy to have a little slide deck and some facts to kind of take us through a little bit of a big what's happening with work and with workers, and then what's really happening here with the pandemic. Thanks, Terry. And so I like to start with that big one, that's all of those colors. If you just want to blow that one up, and maybe even do the slideshow deck up at the top if you can hit it, Terry, because that should blow up the whole image. I don't know if you're able to click that slideshow next to towards the top of the screen.
It's at the top. Yeah,
To the
there.
right,
You go
just
to,
before just up by the share button.
The word slideshow.
they're on it. That's exactly right.
Yeah, this isn't the right place to punch or to push.
Okay,
If
over
you're
to the right,
pushing,
right. Way over to
Shift,
the right. Keep going, keep
line,
going, keep going.
plus.
the
Way
yellow
over.
button.
No, way
There's
over.
a yellow button that says share.
Upper right-hand corner.
Oh,
Okay,
okay.
now up. There you go, slideshow.
Well, I wouldn't.
Not share,
Oh.
slideshow. And not the
I
right
hit that.
arrow. No, it's the slideshow button itself, the large one on the left, right where you were. Perfect. Yep, right there. Nope, go back, go right back.
The word.
Well, you know what? It's fine. We really don't need the blown up image. It was just yeah. Don't worry about it. You just want to get out of there.
There you go.
Oh, yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
You got it.
Yeah,
Never mind.
it's-
2 more seconds. That shows my lack of patience. You want to go back one real quick? I like starting with the last one. If you can go, just click back at this point. I think in
There,
slideshow, you
okay.
should be able to go back. Yeah.
I got it.
Perfect. I love starting these conversations with this one because it's a big look at work in the United States and how it's changed over the last 150 years. I love showing this to union leaders, to workers, and it really just shows, I think, sectors of our economy here and where, you know, the majority of employment has been over time, and really how that's changed. And really, I use this to introduce the idea of change being kind of a common factor and dynamic that's always occurring across work, right? And so, you know, these sectors of our economy are huge. There's a lot going on here. And as big as they may be, though, I just like to remind folks that they're always moving and there is no sure thing. And so on top of that, you know, the next slide, we won't see the video, but I wanted to show it. You know, the last 5 to 10 years, I feel like there was really, and you all may have been part of these or heard of the term, there was a whirlwind of discussions around this idea of the future of work. And that took off. That was the rage, right? And that was really at the heart about technology, about innovation, and what work would look like in the not so distant future at this point than now, right? But this conversation was a little bit more interesting than that because it was also about at some level about the importance of people, about their value, and unsaid at times also in a lot of these debates were questions around who had agency and whose voices what considerations would be considered or taken into account as all of these things were getting resolved, right? And so I like showing this slide just to say that there's really good materials and some good content on our website. We're happy to share in some reports with some deep research we did into this because as unions, we do think it's important to be, we don't need to watch the video, but we do need to be, you know, it's too long. We can just yeah, stop that one, Terry. But we do need to be thinking and talking about these things. And so, you know, and so if we go to the next slide, if we can, and I'll move quickly here. We can just hit forward. All right, Terry, are you still with me? Can we hit forward on the slide or should I just share mine on this side?
You're muted, Terry.
You said to hit the arrow and I have, but that doesn't take me where I want to go. Let's see.
Yeah, well, we don't, you know, we don't have to do this. I mean, I was just going to show some graphs, but I'm happy to just kind of give the big picture. If that's,
is this it?
Yeah, that's the stuff. That's the stuff. But we don't have to go through the slideshow. I think we're fine. I'll just, if you want to just follow, and I'll just kind of use the words. But yeah, let's not worry about the slideshow so much. I mean, I think what I wanted to show really beyond the tectonic changes in technology and in the sectors of our economy is that there's also this constant question around return on work, right? And the previous slide, we won't get into it here, but it just showed how wages have really been going down, really over the last 50 years, pretty significantly. But you know, and productivity has really been exploding. Like, right, U.S. workers are more productive now than they've really been in a long time. And that productivity does turn into value and profits, right? And it's got to go somewhere, and it's going to the top, right? It's certainly, workers are not keeping up, in a return on their work. That was the big point. And so, yeah, it sounds like there's somebody that's not muted. For folks that are muted, if you could go on mute. It sounds like there's some background coming right. Thank you, Sally. That's right. Awesome. And so can we keep going, Terry?
Terry, can you mute everybody?
Yeah. Let's see.
Yeah, and
Is
so
that
this, let's just keep going, Terry. Let's keep going. The next one, and this was all before the pandemic hit, right? And so let's stay on this one for a second, because the pandemic, like I said, changed everything. And it, the last few years we've been, I guess, it made these questions around work, and it, it made workers have questions around really
I'm sorry to
questioning whether it
interrupt.
was worth it. Go ahead, Chris.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Terry, your audio is on, and it's
I
making
know
it.
it is, and just a second.
If someone wants to make me co-host, or do you have that ability, Carlos? I can help out.
I don't. Because if I had co-host, I could also just take this. But that's
Gotcha.
But I think I think I can wait and we can figure this out for sure. I'm sorry, Chris. Thank you. Okay, we can keep going. Thank you. It sounds like we're good now, right? So, I mean, I think the thing with the pandemic is that it just made workers really reevaluate whether it was worth it, right? Like, and we all saw the stresses, and one of the first things we all heard, was about the Great Resignation. You all may have heard of terms like Striketober. There's this kind of on Twitter, there's hot organizing summer, but really we're talking about like a resurgence of worker organizing. And I wanted to share just a few data points from a survey we did, because we wanted to understand ourselves in the labor movement, like what's going on here with a lot of these workers, particularly the predominantly non-union workers. And we took a deeper dive into the Great Resignation, right, which was really kind of over 2 years. And we came to understand was actually a giant thing, right? I mean, 14% of the workforce, which, to put that into real numbers, that means that in that 2-year period, 23 million workers plus voluntarily left their job, right? I mean, to give you a comparison, that's more workers that are than are union members in the labor movement, right? A movement larger than the labor movement has spoken with their feet and left work because it was that bad, right? And so if we can go to the next slide, Terry, but and I think and we wanted to look deeper, right? And you can go to the next one. And what we found is that it wasn't just wages, it wasn't just the economics and those slides I just showed you. It was a whole lot of things, right? It was COVID and the pandemic. People had real concerns around safety. PPE, right? The protective personal equipment was in limited supply. Everything changed, right? I see some of the questions. We'll come back to some of those. Exactly. I mean, what happened to a lot of folks when unemployment, even when it was extended and it stopped coming in, things got really hard, right? And so if we could just go to the next one, Terry, you're doing great. And we kept looking into what was going on. As you could imagine, and I like sharing this, right? COVID hit people differently, right? Like, and people were quitting for different reasons, right? Like women, men, workers over than 40, workers under 40, and workers of color, right? Everybody had a different situation going on during the pandemic, but it was really forcing workers to really reconsider it, right? And so if we can go to the next slide, Terry. Perfect. And this to me was astonishing from a labor union perspective, right? Just that, like, really workers had soured, I think, on the experience and what was work, right? Because it really wasn't working out for them in a real way, right? And so this is some of the data around why workers were leaving, right? And so, all of this data was kind of to start setting up some of these next things. If we can go to the next slide. Right, this then to us in the labor movement is not surprising, right? Like unions start becoming relevant again, right? Like organizations and movements that are fighting for personal protection equipment, right? To ensure that like teachers and students are safe in the classrooms. Like all of these things start becoming of interest to the public and also to workers. I mean, look at the jump in union interest, right, over the years, right? And it's just an explosion in the number of workers that are trying to figure out how to join a union and have more of a say at work, right? We can keep going, Terry. And all of the slides before you and this slide really tell you is that it's not just about bread and butter. It's not just about wages and health insurance, though certainly it is about that, right? It's around, you see it here, a lot of people care about how technology is changing their work. A lot of people care about scheduling. A lot of people care about childcare and like being able to take care of their family, right? Like people feel discriminated with at work, right? Even today. And so all of these things are happening, and that's really making people see unions as one of the ways, right, that they can really make concrete improvements in their workplace. Keep going, Terry, if you don't mind. And I mean, this to us is exciting. It's across sectors. It's across the country. It's in employers big and small. It's in industries new and old. I mean, workers are organizing and having success. But like I said early when I started, it is really hard. And it'd be nice if it ended here and it were that easy. But unfortunately, it's not, right? And I think this is, Carrie, I think why we wanted to talk a little bit with this group, right? Because what also happens these days a lot and has continuously happened, and you'll see in this next slide as we get here to it, is that it's almost impossible for workers to form a union. And so this is what's happening, right? Like union organizing is happening in different facilities, and more than half of workers are told that facility is going to close down. There's threats of closing it down, or an actual close down. I think in New York City there was a Trader Joe's wine shop that announced that they wanted to organize, and within days it was closed, right? I mean, you see it here, and this is just a short list. I mean, you don't want to see the long list, right? But the point is that the ability to have a free and fair election and conversation with your coworkers is not truly free, right? Not in the way that like we traditionally think about like a political election. Though those are maybe getting less free as well, right? And so there's a lot of challenges to worker organizing. Next slide. And I mean, it's not just, I want to paint the numbers, right? Because it's getting to crisis level. We're in, we'll come back to Starbucks. Exactly, Chris. That is exactly right. I mean, it really has gotten sharper over time. I do feel like this is important to say, right? Because this is what workers are facing, right? It really went from like, some pushback. Some employers were okay, some employers weren't. I mean, now you have 82% of employers or more that are using five or more of the tactics on the last slide to stop worker organizing, right? And that list is not exhaustive, right? And so that is a real problem, right? That is a real scary thing, and a threat that really does freeze and scare people, away from organizing. Next slide. And and that's, I think, why spaces like this, why talking to organizations and people, I think that care or are interested in talking about it is so important, because we do need to be having these conversations. We do need to support increased organizing, and there is I'm excited to at least hope, right, and think that there is a resurgence and a new kind of focus on growth and organizing in the labor movement, but it's not going to be enough, right, just for unions to do it. We need to build communities of support around organizing. If we have time, we have a little video here of a case study of in New York State, what that's meant, right? And also we need to think about and address our broken labor laws, right? And what workers, and ensure that they're up to date and that the rules, right, are fair when workers try to exercise their right to organize, right? And so we've been really excited and honored to partner with you all on efforts like the Protecting the Right to Organize, the PRO Act legislation, and other things across the country. And so, I think right now those would be the two things I would leave, the question you started with, Terry, what could we be doing? I think it's most immediately when and where workers are organizing into unions, for raises and improvements. I mean, heat, right? Like heat being and climate change being such a big thing. I mean, it's getting hotter, right? Like bus drivers, all these workers like are fighting for like AC in their vehicles, right? And so where that's happening, we really do need to help kind of equalize the playing field and support if and where possible, and also look to address our broken labor laws, right? It's not one or the other, it's both and much more. But I think those are the things I wanted to kind of offer, and really more than anything ahead of Labor Day, just excited to talk about work and this thing that is such an important part of so many people's lives and has giant implications in it. So I'll stop with that. That was my presentation, and just thank you again for the opportunity. Happy to address any of the questions in the chat or any questions you may want to curate, Terry. You let me know. I see some hands, and so why don't I just go ahead, Terry? Yeah, I see two hands, and then I see some stuff in the chat. So why don't we start with one of the hands up? Kit, you're up if you want. I saw your hand up first. You're on the top of the screen. We'll take your question, and then we'll come back to some of the stuff here in the chat. I just want to catch up here, but take it away.
I think you'll find that this audience is extremely interested in fixing the broken labor laws. Can you provide us an example of how that's happening now?
Yeah, well, there's actually a video here, Terry. I don't know if we should show it. I'll put it in the link. You all should watch it, actually, right? But there's a lot of ways that this could look like, right? At the federal level, I think there's two big labor bills. Actually, there's a lot more, but there's two big ones, I think, that we're following. There's the Protect the Right to Organize, the PRO Act, which on the private sector would really update our broken labor law, and there's the the Freedom to Negotiate Act for the public sector, right, which is the complementary act. We're happy to share stuff on that, but there's also state bills and laws that are being pushed to really address broken labor laws. As soon as I'm done here, I'll put it on the chat. But New York State is a perfect example, right? New York State just recently updated their farm worker laws, right, enabling organizing in the field of New York. There's actually a lot of agriculture in New York, right? Like Chobani, like all of these dairy, like there's a lot going on in New York in terms of agriculture. And recently, that happened about 2-3 years ago now. There's a video, and again, I'll put it on the link, where now the UFCW, the RWDSU, this organization called Rural and Migrant Ministries, have really gone about organizing farm workers and helped win now the first unions and contracts in the fields of New York for farm workers, right? And so that to me is a great example of like looking at broken labor laws, doing worker organizing, building these communities of support for these fights, and really doing it at a state and local level. Obviously they also are interested in federal labor law reform, and we're all pushing. We can talk about that, but there are opportunities at the state level also to be doing that, and that's not the only way, right? So there's the enabling unionization, and sadly, there's also defending against the legal attacks that we already are very familiar with, perhaps, like right to work, it being something that folks are trying to enshrine into the Constitution of Tennessee this next cycle. So there's both things on offense and on defense. If enabling collective bargaining is something you're interested with, that can also be done at the state level, and lots more. But anyway, just I see other hands, but hopefully that started giving you a flavor of what that looks like or what that could be. So I did see some stuff on the chat, and it was mostly, I think, folks noting that, Starbucks, they're up to 200 stores, Chris, right, if I'm not mistaken, that have been organized. And I think we've seen a deep commitment from that company to hire the most expensive union busters, do all the tactics. I think I've heard a number of upwards of 80 or more workers that have been part of committees who've been fired as retaliation, blatant. In Memphis, there were 7 of those workers this week that were reinstated. But the company is using all of the legal mechanisms and these broken labor laws to really draw out the workers and churn them over, which is something we also see in Amazon, right? But anyway, I see some other hands. Sally, you've had your hand up for a while. What's going on?
Yeah, 2 emails that I got today that relate. From the More Perfect Union, noticed that the NLRB ruled against Starbucks for union busting, forcing them to pay back 100% benefits. And ordered managers and supervisors to attend a training and the letter of apology to workers, and requiring Howard Schultz to record a video admitting to his illegal actions, which is kind of cool. Also, Starbucks Worker United just marked the 1-year anniversary, and they've won union elections in 225 stores, more than 6,000 workers. A third have gone on strike, and they're asking the public to sign a no contract, no coffee pledge. So that's something we can all do. Check.
No, that's phenomenal. I mean, it's really exciting to hear you all following that, and it just means you're aware how important it is to, you know, and how much of a difference it has, you know, means to have these agencies doing their job and interpreting the laws in a way that are kind of, you know, pro-worker, or certainly not anti-worker, right? And so that's extremely important, and a lot more could be said there, but that's absolutely right. Chris, sorry, go ahead.
Thanks. I haven't heard, sorry about the squeaking. I haven't heard much about the PRO Act recently, other than I think it passed the House, but it's obviously can't go through the Senate unless 10 Republicans are flipped, which is not going to happen. Is there, where's that at? I don't know anything about it. Just, I mean, is it just sitting in limbo and no one's going to do anything about it, or what's up with it right now?
I mean, I think the next phase and pillar that needs to fall is the Senate, right? You're right. The PRO Act has passed in the House. There's, I think 48, 49, how you kind of senators who have said they're on the record. There's, in our minds, there's maybe 50. We're chasing more than 50, right? There's some folks that might be out there, but you know, I think the big problem is that to pass this type of legislation, you need 60, right? And to overcome the filibuster, which is I think what you're talking about, right? And I think that is just a daunting challenge, I think, and I think, yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean we're not going to fight. And I think there's been some effort and some thinking around, are there pieces of the PRO Act that can be passed through reconciliation? And it's, you know, at this point, maybe for the next one, right, we just got the IRA, but there's a thought, and I think will be efforts to push for penalties for as much as you can in those processes. You know, it's just a really complicated landscape, to be honest with you, right? Because I think there's a fundamental need for labor law reform, and there's also a major need to invest in our own infrastructure, to invest in like creating jobs, to invest in like addressing climate change and union jobs. And so I think we're pushing for all of these things, but recognizing that like we need to push all of the Dems that are there and then try to change the game on the other side. But that's a real daunting one, right? Which is also why I think we were starting to talk a little bit about like what you can do at the state level, at the local level. And I do think we need to keep pushing and fighting. I mean, I think that's our posture. I think we're going to figure out here in Labor Day and going through the election how to continue to bring up the PRO Act, how to fight for it, how to make it an issue at the state level, and put some pressure up. But I think we you know, it's that 60 is really hard, right? And anyway, that's, yeah. Sherry.
Yeah, the labor laws, you said fix the labor laws. They were good at one time. Did they get turned back on some parts or sunset or what?
I mean, you'd have to ask an actual, I think, lawyer. We have some great ones about that. But I would say three things, I guess, right? I mean, there's the New Deal laws. There were, I guess, the changes and the amendments to labor law, right, that started handcuffing, what labor could do, what was permissible. People talk about Taft-Hartley as one of the first kind of major, regressions. But then I think there's been massive changes in the economy, right? There's been massive changes, I think, in how work and companies are structured, right? I would say that between globalization, changes in technology, a shift and an increase, or I would say, employers, at one point were going for vertical integration, and now there's this term that's used, fissurization, right, where they're breaking up their companies to separate different pieces, and that kind of changes what you can organize and how you can organize them as a union, how you can petition and go for them. And so I would say that labor law is outdated, has been limited and, handcuffed, and there's been massive changes in the economy and employers. So it's really out of date at this point, right? Arguably you could say that about a lot of economic policy, but certainly labor law is one that has not been fixed or touched in a very long time.
Yeah, the
I think
Taft-Hartley I
there's,
heard about.
yeah, I think there's one thing that's happened, and that's that since Reagan, they've been out to eliminate unions, and the way they can do that is through the regulatory, the labor board. If they put people that are anti-labor on the labor board, nothing happens. So.
No, it's been a hard time, but I think this is where I would just want to remind us, and I feel like the trade unionist in me would be upset at myself if I didn't say it, which is like, look, the laws weren't the major enabler of big organizing in the past. The laws were changed and updated as a reaction to worker organizing. And I think that is kind of the fundamental idea and at the heart of what we're trying to figure out these days, right? How do we find workers in motion? How are we supporting, workers in motion? How are we helping them figure out like their path to power, and getting behind them, right? And then doing all of this other work, legal, regulatory, the courts, like everything we can. But I think, the big thing that we're learning, and maybe this was always known, right, is that like you need workers at the center, and they're fired up, ready to go, right? And so in some ways we got to figure it out as we go with them, right? But anyway, so I think that's right. I mean, the challenges of labor law, I think, will always be here. I believe we will pass labor law reform, and I have no doubt that there will be efforts to turn that back or kind of further limit labor's power after that, right? And so we just need to keep going, as kind of we have over time. And so anyway, Chris, did you have another reaction, comment, or I see your hand is still up?
I had another question. I don't know if this is like coming up later or if I'm getting ahead of something or anything, but I am going to be delivering like a sermon on Labor Day in my church, and I definitely want to end with as much of a clear call to action as possible, and knowing that there's a lot of folks in our congregation who are retired, a lot of folks who are parents that work in non-union tech sector kind of jobs and whatnot. There's I'm sorry, I work at the Shoreline Unitarian Church in Shoreline, Washington, which is bordering Seattle, right on the north side.
Recording in trouble.
Didn't hear that. Sorry, what? Never mind.
Probably-
Anyways, but yeah, yeah, I'm planning on kind of telling people, like, to definitely subscribe to and keep in tune with like what the labor board, I think it's the Labor Council, they have like a newsletter that's really good and really plugs people into stuff. Really, just trying to maybe encourage people, if they're interested, to maybe have some kind of organized group gathering, of church members to like go out and support things. So it's not just like subscribe to a newsletter and do whatever you want, but like maybe like as a small group of people, if I can convince enough people like, hey, this deserves your attention just as much as like, hot button issues that kind of come up, and yeah. And is there anything else, I guess, other than donate and like show up for, like what you would say like would be a good call to action for people?
I mean, of course, because as you get to know me, you'll understand. I make things complicated, but I think that's fantastic. I mean, top of my mind reaction is like, we need to make sure, if you haven't met them, there's someone called Rigo Valdez at the MLK Labor Council, and you're right, that's a fantastic labor council that's doing something very unique as far as labor councils right now are. I mean, there's a number of these, but they really are anchoring and thinking through multi-union growth strategies, doing stuff at Climate Pledge Arena. I mean, resettling and making sure that like Afghan and other refugees are getting access to good union jobs. There's an incredible volume of work happening there. They just launched a digital hiring hall to place workers who are unemployed. Just, you know, hey, these are union jobs that are available. You should come and check them out. And like, we're happy to help you figure out how to access them. And so there's all kinds of stuff. I mean, if you go on their website, there's even people chatting with you, like organizers right away to try to figure out how to talk to you. So I think all that to say, you should totally connect with them. Your gut instinct to do that is right. I mean, you know, and Michael Stock, who I think is here, might be helpful in this, but we always also suggest if you have a committee or a group of folks in a congregation, like, and there's worker organizing happening around, bringing a worker, you know, to kind of join those folks, to talk about it, to kind of share space and kind of get to know one another. That can be very powerful for workers and for the you know, for congregations as well. You know, I mean, it's the low-hanging fruit answer is like, well, you know, I think of like, who are some of the big companies based in Seattle, because I think there's major market shapers in your geography, right? And so you think about like Amazon, Microsoft, Starbucks. I mean, all of these companies have workers organizing, and I think maybe leaving, you know, your committee of folks with the question of like, you know, if there were a side, what side are we on, and how can we do something, you know, not necessarily just connected to Labor Day, but beyond, to make sure that in our community, right, like workers that want to exercise this freedom and be can do that, right? And I think just, you know, asking the question and stepping into that type of support, and then figuring out tactically where that makes sense would be beautiful. But that's a lot, you know, that's a lot of work and takes time. And, you know, you get people comfortable with that. So starting with maybe talking more about the issues, talking to workers is always a great start, I think, just, you know, because it makes it real for people, this question of unions. It's a very different thing. It's not an entity, an organization. It's these people right in front of me who just want, you know, better schedules. So anyway, yeah. Michael Spock, I see your hand up.
Yes. My name is Michael Spock, and I'm the Religion Labor Coordinator for the National AFL-CIO. And I've been organizing our state federations and central labor councils to reach out to the faith community and offer and inviting them to host a labor speaker on Labor Sunday to make a 5-minute presentation about the common bond between faith and labor. And I would help you connect with the Labor Council, but offering you know, to them the opportunity to have, you know, a guest, well, a speaker in the congregation. But again, it doesn't have to be more than, we're recommending 5 minutes. So, but at least you then have the potential for building a relationship from there. If that's our rationale, because a bulletin insert is one thing, a newsletter is another thing, but having you know, some relationship, you know, person to person, is you know, is just very useful to developing our bond. Yeah. And I'd be happy to put my email in the chat, and you can email me, and I'd be happy to assist.
Along with that, Michael, you worked with me to put together a list of areas that you use and the AFL-CIO agree, and I've got it as a screen share if I can find it. I think this is it. Yeah. Okay. No, this is a letter. This is not the one I wanted. That's a thank you note from to Susan Frederick Gray from the AFL-CIO. Let's see, stop share. I'll go back and find that while Lucy can talk.
I received a notice today from Solutionary Rail, which is in Vashon, by the way, not far from Seattle. And it was talking about railroad workers now wanting to have a movement, that things have become worse and worse for them. But the point I wanted to bring up is that one of their complaints is that the bosses are going to put too few people on the trains, and they don't want fewer workers. They want at least as what they had. But that raises the issue that so many businesses now can't even find enough workers, which I would think would be good for the labor movement's protests, but it also creates a problem in that it's harder to do your job because there aren't enough workers around you. So it's, you know, there are too many things going at once. It's just, I just wanted to comment on that.
Well, thank you for bringing that up. I'm really excited here because you all are very aware of different struggles. And I think you're talking about like the big fight right now in rail is around two-man crews, right? Or two people crews versus one person crews. And really the increased hours and the worker shortage and all of this is really breaking, right? The rail workforce, right? And so, you know, I think this is extremely important. But it's not just about the number of people in crews. I mean, there's different sets of laws. Here we go, broken labor laws that regulate the rail industry. And I worked at a labor council. I led the Metro Washington Labor Council here where I lived for a few years. And I just got to know a lot about rail workers, right? Like including like pay time off, like all of these things that other workers get, they don't get. And it's just really an untenable thing. And so it is a really big fight. And I'm just glad you're following. And certainly that's what I think that will impact all of us, right? Because it's not just, I mean, it's you know, you got to remember, you know, these railroads and the freight they carry can be very dangerous stuff. I mean, in other countries, there's been major accidents. So it's, you know, we don't want to wait or, you know, have a corrective conversation around this after something bad happens, right? Like, let's, you know, it is big questions in play here. So thank you for bringing that up, Lucy. And Michael, I see your hand. So you may be following this more than I am.
No, I'm trying to get my hand down. So you see my hand up. I'm on a cell phone.
You're good,
so.
man. You're on a cell phone.
I'm good.
You're good.
So.
Thank you, Michael. Awesome. Well, I don't see any other questions or hands then. But this, yeah. So I'm happy to share any other kind of reactions, thoughts, whatever you think is useful, Theory. This has already been great. I'm loving it. How do I get to the next one? Oh, I see Sally's hand went up. And Kit.
I thought you might want to see what I put together. Michael helped me put together on places where unions and the Unitarian Universalists agree. And there's a list of issues: LGBTQ, immigrant, racial justice, a just transition to deal with climate change and environment, the democratic process and voting rights for all, gender justice, economic justice, healthcare justice, stopping exploitation of prison labor, corporate responsibility, opposition to Citizens United, stopping torture, ending present-day slavery, employment non-discrimination for sexual minorities, freedom of speech and airwaves, ending poverty, religious freedom, moral values for pluralistic society. And there are only 5 things where they haven't taken any issue: reproductive rights, banning capital punishment, right to bear arms, sex education, and peace. And there's only one place where we really don't agree, but I understand why unions would not go against the police or wanting to defund the police. That unions are all about solidarity, and if you start defunding the police, then then you're breaking up their solidarity. If you want this, let me know. Put your email address in the chat, and I will send that to you. Or I can give you mine, or ask Michael for it, and he can tell me.
Thank you. Somebody mentioned the word bonds earlier, and that list just made me think, like, I love that word bonds, but it's like, wow, we are about, like, you know, almost, I like to think about rebuilding the fabric of society is what that document was making me think. So thank you, Terry. I see Sally and Kit's hands up. I saw those come up recently, so they may have some things to add here.
Yeah, I'd seen a question in the chat about union involvement in Green New Deal and that sort of issues. Did we?
Yeah, I mean, do you want me to just elaborate? I can come up and, oh, thank you. I see some of the chat as well. I mean, I will just say that, like, the labor climate conversation is getting more and more exciting. I think, and it, you know, there's always been a need and I think an interest, but I think over time also there's just been real challenges and differences. But I mean, I think just what was it, 2 weeks ago, we saw a major bill pass that addresses climate infrastructure, and I think is not perfect, far from it, but I think maybe steps in the right direction. But I got to say this, you know, at the state level, it's just really incredible to see, you know, how this is really coming together. I mean, I'm thinking about, like, the Texas Climate Justice Initiative. There's a similar initiative in Rhode Island, in Illinois. In Maine, you know, the labor movement, the environmental movement came together around, like, a Green New Deal for workers. And so I am kind of, you know, this isn't easy. There's a lot of differences of opinion and kind of big things on the table, but I am really heartened to see people, you know, figuring it out and working through those kind of differences of starting opinion and figuring out how to get to commonality, because it is true. I think that, you know, it's impossible to deny that our world is rapidly changing and that we need to do something, many things, as much as we can, and everybody what they can to address it, and big policy, big bills, you know, mitigation, adaptation, all of it presents opportunities. And so I do think it's really exciting to see. And I think the big concern, I think, and it's out there, right, is just, you know, what do we do and how do we ensure that, like, if there are transitions, that they're just, because there's also examples of transitions of other sectors, and we started with that changing economy sector slide, right, for a reason, because they change, and there's no guarantee that it will always be just, right? And so how do we make sure it is, you know, as just as it can be, and that workers have a voice in that? And so you know, that's the work continues. But I am heartened to see just so many kind of, you know, things coming together at the state, local level, and now federally as well. I mean, I'll stop yapping. Kit, I see your hand.
Yeah, I was, when you were talking to Michael about the difficulties with passing the PRO Act, I don't think that we talked about whether the PRO Act should be a major issue in electoral campaigns for Congress this year. And I haven't heard much noise about that.
I think you will. I'm not allowed to share it because it's not released. The Data for Progress is doing new polling on just that topic. We've been doing some polling in key states. I'm reviewing some stuff in Arizona and some other places. And so I think, look, I mean, in this recent you know, debate we had around student debt, I mean, I think in some ways, right, the big thing we're interested in figuring out is talking about the economy, about jobs, really calling the question around, like, you know, where workers are in our society and economy, and really elected officials and politicians, what side they're on, right? And we're on the side of the working class and want to champion that. And so I think you will see a lot more of that. And certainly the PRO Act will be a big part of that, where we're going to raise it as much as we can, particularly in key states. So all I would say is, I think, you know, we tend to think of Labor Day as sometimes the unofficial kickoff to our political season, right, going into November, that 2-month march. And so, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if you start seeing a lot more of that kind of sharp, kind of specific thrust going into Labor Day. But any of the data and polling I'm referencing, we'll make sure to share through Terry or others here. so that you're using that, so that if you're in a key state or folks in those states, like we still are doing work and trying to touch offices. But I think as it was Chris was saying, I mean, we do need 60, and that's going to be tough. It doesn't mean we're not going, but it does mean, anyway, let me not get too much into all of that because there might be other stuff, but yeah.
Usually there's no shortage of people willing to talk in a UU group.
Back
We're
in
verbal people.
in early pandemic days, when the airlines asked for a cut to the quarantine time so that they could, and the government, the CDC went with it. There was a big outcry and a call for a May Day strike. We got some May Day rallies, but the groundswell of willingness to get involved for a while there, at least, was pretty impressive, and hopefully we can build on that.
I think you're right. I mean, I can't say I'm a long time May Day person because I'm like, what is that? And I used to say I was like a long time. Once I hit 10 years in DC, I thought I'd been here for a long time, and I said that to someone, and they're like, I've been here 40 years. What are you talking about? So I'm not long time anything. But May Day is, I think, just a really important, just mobilization and symbolic date here, abroad. And I think you're asking an important question, which is like, how are we fermenting and supporting the organic worker kind of uprising and militancy we're seeing? How are we promoting solidarity across workers? And I think we should just continue to try to figure that out. I mean, I can say that, there was a piece of your question that I think was more around like maybe a general strike on May Day. And I think that comes with certain legal challenges, right? People were asking about, just how labor law, kind of can limit, what unions can do sometimes, right? But there's some stuff, but I do think, the Great Resignation, Striketober, I mean, all of these things, May Day, right? We do know workers are in motion. And I think that's our challenge, really. How do we ferment, support that? How do we bring it together? And how do we weave that with other spaces, other communities, other people that want to build these bonds, and towards those things on the page Terry shared with us, right? The things that we agree on. So I think that's the right kind of direction. I don't know that I have an answer per se.
I have noticed that it's logical that Starbucks is going to have a big challenge with unionizing, because when you have a store with 10 to 20 or 30 workers, how do you, and you have thousands of stores, how do you afford the union busters? But you take an organization like Amazon, where they may have 2 or 3 facilities or 10 facilities in a state with thousands of workers, they can afford to hire somebody to go in and break up the union. Economically, it's just much easier for them to handle that. So it was really good to see that I think it's Staten Island's Amazon got unionized, and it was also satisfying because they have been really racist pigs when they were mocking the guy who organized it. He's a nobody and everything. He showed him.
No, I think you're talking about Chris Smalls, and I think that's one to support, continue to support. I mean, it shows how, to your point, I'm just underscoring it, right? Broken our labor law is, right? Because it's trivial dollars, even though for some people it's a lot of money, but for a company like Amazon, it's nothing. They'd rather pay the fees or, exorbitant dollars for lawyers to avoid the union than at the end of the day have workers have more control and agency over their work, right? Like they've made the calculations, and it just shows how egregious it is. But it's very important that there be a community around those workers, right? And so I know we're excited and trying to figure out how to continue to support them. There's, I think, an upcoming election in upstate New York that they're doing, and so just how are we supporting them in whatever they need? As kind of an organic, independent effort.
Hmm?
Talk, Bob. Talk, Bob.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Medicare for all is very important for many Unitarian Universalists, especially for this group. Could you talk a little bit, and there's some confusion with people about where AFL-CIO stands in terms of Medicare for all. We heard that some unions really don't support Medicare for all. Could you comment on that, please?
Yeah, I'll have to send it to you because I don't have it in front of me. We did a resolution at our convention in July, or June, I guess 2 months ago now. And I think affirmed a commitment for Medicare for all, and I think was, and I think generally was carved and driven by a lot of the unions that are really, I think, clear in their analysis that we need to move to a different type of healthcare. But it was also reconciled with some of the concerns and considerations for, workforces and kind of workers that have existing plans that are hard to move away from and which might not be replaceable, immediately. So I do think that there was a recommitment, I guess, towards Medicare for all. I think, the big question is how to build the political will and support to actually pass legislation. I mean, in many ways, I would say it's maybe even harder than labor law reform. It may be, right? I don't know. That's the question, right? Because it's that big, right? It's that big of a thing. I don't know that that's true, but it's one of those that's really hard on the Hill, right? And you will ultimately need the 60 votes as well, right? It's not one of those 50 vote limited kind of issues. And so I think we've reaffirmed our support for it. I'll get the resolution here shortly in the next minute if I can, and I'll link it. And certainly there's some unions that are really driving it. I think we saw that as good. And at the state level, it looks different also, right? There's some states that are really driving and pushing, and where folks are trying to figure it out. I know in California, this has been a big deal. Vermont obviously made that big push, had some setbacks. And so it's, I guess it's an ongoing fight, but it's, I'll go on Google and get the resolution and forward it here right now.
Thank you. Okay.
would you like me to show that video? The video that you gave us the link to?
I'm happy to know.
No, I'm okay on that. I was just sharing it if folks wanted it and to take a look.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
Sometimes if folks wanted to share a video with a congregation to explain unions or different things, like that was a good success story,
Really?
like a feel good video. Anyway, Michael, you may be unmuted now.
A lot of pain.
Michael, should you go and attention to you? I don't think he knows we're listening. I'm on screen, I don't know why.
We have a long pause, so I'm going to ask another question. Has anybody actually asked for a Starbucks boycott? How would that work?
Well, the link that I put up was really for people who want to get involved. They say, don't sign it if you don't want to be contacted by the campaign and actively support it. But they're saying, no contract, no coffee.
Now that means that we won't go to Starbucks. Is that what
Right,
it means?
right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Actually, when we were in Portland for General Assembly, the Starbucks closest to the convention hall was unionized, and the one that was just up the street from our hotel, which was across from the convention hall, was not unionized. So we went to the one that was unionized. It was more convenient and it was unionized, which would be a way of really showing support to go to just the unionized ones.
Yes, that makes sense. Yeah.
Right. Democratic Socialists of America have a campaign, Solidarity is Brewing, which they're working with Starbucks workers. And some of they say, you know, don't ask too many questions if you walk into your local Starbucks unless you know they're organizing. But when you know a store is organizing, they've had sip-ins where people go and, you know, order coffees with names of, instead of their name, like Solidarity Forever and what have you, and sit and hand out literature and sip in. And, but you know, you gotta get agreement with the workers before you do something like that. You don't do that on your own, for sure.
Good plan.
Yeah.
A valuable suggestion, concrete.
Well, there's the old saying, and I think Carlos is sort of, in a way, referred to this, that political change is downstream from cultural change. And historically, for a labor movement to succeed in this country, or probably any country, it really needs a lot of cultural support. I mean, you need widespread understanding of what labor organizing is all about, and you need a lot of sympathy from all the way from very young people to very old people, whether they're in the workforce or not, in some ways doesn't matter, but they need to be helpful at appropriate moments. They don't cross picket lines, and they do honor boycotts. And when there are dinner table conversations about unions, they express support. And keep in mind, folks, that there are many people in your congregations who are already union members. Yeah, teachers, healthcare workers, transportation, food industry, the list goes on. We sometimes forget that. It's not as if the workers are sort of way out there, some faraway place. You know, quite frequently you're sitting next to somebody who's in a union who maybe just needs to show up for union meetings sometimes. It may be as simple as that. And just be more supportive of the union that they already belong to. And so there are many ways in which the culture can respond. I also remind people that, you know, unions are accountable and they are democratic and they are participatory and they are surprisingly transparent. All these things that we often talk about that we say we want. We want to build new alliances with democratic groups that are accountable. Well, welcome to the labor movement. You may already be in the labor movement, maybe just haven't thought about it. So I'm trying to fill some time here. You have an extra sermon.
I think we only have one person who's not on the board that's here. Well, no, there are two, but one is Carol Allen, who was on the board, and the other is Lavona and Bob, who are good friends of the board. So if we've covered everything, we can say goodnight. That's up to Carlos. How are you feeling about that?
I am okay, and I'm just really grateful. This was great space. I'm now gonna walk away, Robert, thinking about the union label and that movement and some of the culture behind that. I really love how you framed that. So just thank you, and thank you all for making space and time to talk about this. And know that if ever invited, I'll be right back. So just let me know.
You will be invited back. Thank you, Carl, and Michael too. Thank you both. Yeah, thank you all. Yeah.
Okay, shall we say goodnight? Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, board. Okay. It's really good to have you. Kit, do you have your hand up?
No, that's an applause.
Applause, yeah. Now, why don't I have Solidarity Forever queued up? Oh, well.
Yeah. Okay.
in your minds.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Here's bread and roses. That's the best I can do. Take care.
Good.